Today, we continue to bridge the gap between natty and geared up bodybuilding by having prep coach and natural bodybuilder Cliff Wilson on the show. Do bodybuilding competitors need to peak differently based on their ethnicity? I asked Cliff how he can peak geared bodybuilders when he's natural, and what the differences are during the last 48 to 72 hours before a bodybuilding contest. He also breaks down his peaking process of rapid backloading. I also asked Cliff his opinions on Retatrutide and whether he is seeing negative effects from the peptide during prep and on stage. Stay tuned, because you're between two dumbbells.
532, you're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy?
I'm the king of the corner, the ruler of the block. Moving silent in the night while they're watching the clock.
I'm your host, Skip Hill, and I'm bringing over 40 years of bodybuilding experience to the table, including over 25 years of online coaching. Joining me today, as usual, is Dr. Marv, aka the Educated Meathead. And today we have contest prep coach and natural bodybuilder Cliff Wilson joining us to continue to bridge the gap between geared up bodybuilding and natural or natty bodybuilding. Ladies and gentlemen of the audio radiance, you're between two dumbbells. Appreciate you coming on the show, Cliff. Happy to have you.
Glad to be here.
I want to open by having you give the listeners a little bit of background about your credentials as far as how long you've been coaching, how you got into it, your competitive background, all that boring stuff that we personally don't like to talk about or be asked about. But I want the listeners to know, because there are very few coaches in the industry, I'd say less than a handful, if I'm being honest. I know that's kind of rough, that I have respect for the work that they do, the reputation they have, and you're one of those people.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate that. And, it's funny. I remember even reading about the work you were doing even when I first started in bodybuilding in general, not even just coaching.
So I'm old as hell. Just go ahead and say it, Cliff. No, I appreciate that. It's always flattering to hear. Yeah, I like that.
There we
word
go.
better.
My competitive background, I started in basketball, grade school, high school, college. I remember going and playing.
You might be thinking, this guy is old. How could he possibly get me into my best condition? Teach me how to optimize my training and save me time while doing it. Reach out to me and let's discuss your goals for 2026. 25 years of online coaching, 41 years of training, 35 years of competing. That's a lot of experience and wisdom. Reach out and let's discuss your goals.
Basketball in college, and I was always skinny as hell. Like when I graduated high school, I'm almost 6'2", and I graduated high school at 156.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when I went off to college, they were like, you got to get in the weight room, right? And I found myself increasingly looking forward to the weight training sessions as opposed to the practices.
Yep.
And that's where it starts. And after I quit playing basketball, I was like, I think I would just, keep that. I'm competitive. So like, why don't I take this thing that I enjoy and find a way to be competitive with it? And naturally, I'm so skinny. Everybody was like, you're going to embarrass yourself. You have no place in the sport. Right. But I was like, honestly, I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to go for it. And so, so I went for it. I was the smallest at my first show, but I took second in the novice division out of like 10 guys. And it's just because I got lean. And I always kind of figured, when I first started with my own, because that's where it kind of starts with, you test on yourself, right?
Oh, yeah.
I knew right away I didn't have the genetics of most of these other guys. So I was like, I've got to find a way to get an edge. So I was kind of blending together what people were already doing. And I used to just buy subscriptions to scientific journals and just read them. And I didn't even know, half the time when you're first starting out, you don't know what you're reading. And so, but it kind of gave me my own style, kind of half meathead, half scientific approach. And so, after I did my first show, I was the leanest. I had everybody asking me how I did that. And I just started coaching people for free. That's where it kind of started.
And what year is this? Like ballpark me.
My first show was 2008.
Okay.
And I kind of really, I helped like a person in 2009, just locally at my gym. And then it just kind of took off. It took off fast because 7 of the first 8 shows I had clients in, I had an overall winner.
Oh, nice.
And so things took off fast. You know what I mean?
That's a good start, Cliff. That's a
good
pretty good start. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It took off fast. And so I was able to be coaching full time by the end of 2011, actually.
Nice.
And so, things have gone, they just ran smooth from there. I've been lucky to work with good people. And, I focused heavily, and where I know we're going to talk about this, but more heavily on the natural side in the beginning, entirely on the natural side in the beginning, because I was natural and that's what I was getting. And over the years now, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but something like 20 world champions and almost 200 pro card winners. Later, here I am, still doing it.
Well, and it's funny because I didn't know that count, but I know what other people say. And when you've been in the industry for a long time, look, I don't get out. I'm not one of those people who get outs. Bear with me. Gets out on the internet and starts going, oh, what's everybody else doing? Man, I just really need to learn. We're all learning, but we're all kind of learning in this, I don't want to say smaller little box, but we're kind of in our area. And yeah, we might go research and check it, but no one's following anybody going, gosh, what are they doing? That's pretty profound. So I don't know much about what you do, like the nuance of it. And that's why I'm excited to have you on, because so many people speak so highly of you. And the record is there. I just didn't know that it was as extensive as it is. So that's very cool. And I want to add one more thing. When you started, it's funny, we kind of have this parallel, because I started with really bad genetics and I still have them to this day. But I knew that I wasn't going to get huge. So I kind of went with and this is old school, so people are like, wow, he's been around a long time. Rich Gaspari was like a god to me, because he was a big guy, but he wasn't going to beat anybody on size. He just decided, you know what, I'm just going to get absolutely peeled and then change the game at that time for conditioning. So it was he kind of opened up this new, I don't want to say era, but in a sense, that's really what it was. And I was all about that. I'm not going to beat you on size, but I'm going to try to get peeled and make you look fat.
Yeah, and it's funny because I turned pro in 2016 and I was a middleweight, and it was a pretty big, show, 30 guys in the open, and I was a middleweight, and I thought for sure I wasn't going to beat the heavyweight. He was almost the same height as me, like a little bit taller, but outweighed me by 44 pounds. And I was like, I'm going to win my class. I was telling my buddy, I was like, I'm going to win my class, but I'm not going to beat that guy in the overall. And he goes, no, you're not. And so when I walk out there, I was just it was my first overall. I was happy to be there. I walk out and you can see I got a video. I got a smile on my face. I'm just happy to be in the overall, right? And I hear my buddy yell out, "Oh shit, you're in this!" And so you can see my smile goes away, and now I'm locked in, ready to go.
Now it's business. Now I better get serious about this. That's funny. Now this brings me to the question that I wanted to open with, but I didn't want to have you go, I'm out of here. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Why don't you take steroids like the rest of us?
I strongly considered it in the beginning.
I think most people did at some point, considered it.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I know some, and we could probably talk about this too, but each side definitely has they get so passionate about their side. If I'm being honest, the biggest thing was I recognized the thing that I did best, which is get shredded, was more highly valued on the natural side.
Okay. I agree with that.
Yeah, it counts for more on the natural side, and I was like, I'll go farther here. You know what I mean? That's kind of the biggest thing. And so that was the biggest reason I stayed that way. My intent, I had a few health issues a few years back, which I'm kind of coming out of now, which is good. But my intent had always been just max myself out naturally, and then around the time I'm 45, at least dip my toe in with some TRT and kind of just keep the progress going.
Sure. Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see if I keep going with my own competitive career at this point. But that was the main reason. The thing I did best was more highly valued on this side, so I stuck with it.
Okay, you know how I said we had parallels before? Okay, this is not a parallel. I figured I was 16. I'm like, I gotta try, and I'm being honest. I know that I get slammed for this sometimes, but I would appreciate that other people would appreciate. Well, at least it's being transparent. But I literally added Cypionate when I was 16 years old. I'm not saying it's smart, but I was like, I just want to get huge. I've told the story, I'm not going to tell it again, about calling the pharmacies when I saw Tony Mandrich's steroid list in the Sports Illustrated that year. And of course, Tony Mandrich's like 45 minutes away from me. He was just kind of a dick. You didn't want to run into this guy, him and Percy Snow. They were not friendly. Anyway, I'm calling around and I'm asking about the gear and stuff. And then the guy on the other end goes, is this Ken Hill? I'm like, "Er!" And I'm like 15 years old at the time, right? Trying to call pharmacies and see if I can get gear. So honestly, that's okay, we have the parallel. Now we're going in different directions. I think it's safe to say though, that maybe not everybody, I don't want to make blanket statements, but I think most people, even lifetime natties, at some point probably did think, I'm thinking if I'm Cliff, I'm like, okay, I'm shredded. What would I look like with a lot more size? You know, that type of thing. But I appreciate it. Make no mistake. I respect it. Do your thing. I'm not one of those judgy stay natural, do your gear. It's your own business. Just don't cheat it in the sense that don't be on gear and then call me as a coach and go, hey, can you get me past this drug test? Hell to the no. Like, what kind of do you have no integrity? Like, what the is that all about?
That's the biggest thing. And so sometimes even on the natural side, people are like, why do you coach enhanced guys, whatever. And I'm like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all kind of doing mostly the same thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, as long as everybody's just staying on their side, I wish more sports had an enhanced side and just a natural division. And then I think it lessens, it really does just even the playing field for everybody, right? You get to choose your path, choose your own adventure. And so, no, it's something I had considered, but then it's like once I was rolling and, all that, I was like, okay, this is definitely it. But my intent had always been to cross over, and if I'm able to continue if my health allows, and I'm able to continue my own competitive career, that will happen eventually.
I got a question to hop in is how did you start working with the enhanced side of bodybuilding then? Because it's pretty rare for a natural guy to work with both, which is awesome that you do, and a lot of respect for that.
Yeah. So early on in my coaching career, I right away I noticed one thing. At least on the natural side, I noticed all the best white coaches had really good looking white clients. All the best black coaches had really good looking black clients.
We are going to be demonetized for this. We're not. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's an observation, and there's truth to it. Yeah.
They only knew how to coach their own prototype. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I kind of set it out where I was like, I want to be able to coach anybody. You know what I mean? Like and I don't want to sound. I hope this doesn't come off as arrogant, but I was like, I really want to be that guy that's known. Where it's like, I always say, my goal for myself is more along the lines of, if people. If somebody said you have to win your next bodybuilding show or you're going to die, who are you going to hire? My goal is to be the first person that comes to people's name. And so,
good goal.
So I was like, okay, I want to be able to coach anybody of any ethnicity. And then it was like, then you have people that are bikini specialists. I was like, I want to be able to coach anybody. You know what I mean? Like literally anybody, bikini. So it's like, honestly, around 2016-ish, I had already had, I don't know, a lot of world champions at that point on the natural side, and almost in every division. And dozens, and honestly, I think over 100 pro cards at that point. I was like, it'd be nice to expand. I was already kind of thinking that way. And then I had somebody reach out to me, real big guy. And he'd been around the game for quite some time, and he had been almost backsliding. And he took last call out at North Americans, and he was like, hey, I'd like you to help me out. He goes, I've been seeing what you're doing. And I was honest with him. At that time, I was like, I don't really know much about the gear side of things. And he's like, I'll show you what I know. And, and then you show me what you know, we'll put it together. We went from last call out to North Americans. And I think we took like 7th place the following year.
Nice.
Nice.
And so big improvement. And then it was like, okay, I can do this. And then it was like I started picking up more people from there once I shared his photos, and it's just kind of slow. In the same way in the beginning of my coaching, I did have to convince people because I was skinny that I could coach bigger natural bodybuilders. Yeah. Now I've kind of had to break in just because I'm natural, I can still coach the enhanced side. Do you know what I mean? But now it's almost about a decade later. Things are kind of I'm starting to break through a little bit here on that side of things, and people trusting I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I thought it was, when I heard that, I only heard that recently, and it was about Austin. And I'm like, at first I admit, I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then I thought about it more. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Peaking, water control, and everything. If the competitor knows what they're using, and at that point those variables are constant, which they would be, then okay, it makes sense. But then I thought, who was the first person? But apparently you just explained it to be like, okay, I'm going to go with a natural guy who seems to know it almost seemed like a bit of a gamble, and yet at the same time it wasn't. Not only were you successful, but it's just not when you break it down. So I'm wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with those constant variables of the gear, it really kind of doesn't play into much, does it?
No, I mean, there's a few differences that I would say, you pick up things over the years. There's a few differences that when you pull some of the gear and things
Sure.
like that, that makes a difference. But a lot of the, carbs, water, sodium, potassium, it's not too different. The only difference is the scale because you're just dealing with a larger body.
Sure.
But that's not a big difference there.
Not always. There are plenty of people who take gear who are not very big. So there's
yes, that is true. Yeah. That is true. And so it's like, I think a lot of it was, one of my other early people was, and you worked with it too, Britney Larson. She used to be Britney Bennett, Britney Larson.
Yep.
And I was honest with my early enhanced clients. The same way I was honest with my early natural clients when I was new. I would say, listen, I would say there's still things I'm learning. And I would say, but if you give me a shot, we will go far because I believe in my ability to learn and adapt and see patterns that, I don't think a lot of other people do. And so let's just, just give me the shot now. I promise you won't regret it.
Well, I'm going to be, again, transparent. That's when I really heard about Cliff because I'm like, I've worked with Britney a few times, really struggled to get her into that peaked, thin skin, crisp. And then here comes, and I see she gets her card, and I'm like, who's this motherfucker? Like, what did he do? Like, I literally was thinking, like, what did he do? Like, I've struggled all, this time, the last 3 times working with, very impressive. I mean, literally, that's one of those times where you just go, okay, damn. What am I going to say about this? Yeah. Like, okay, cool. And at the end of the day, I've been around long enough. I've matured enough. Surprisingly, shut up, Dr. Marv. But I was able to say, you know what? At the end of the day, good for her. Like, she got to that point. I could not get her there. And that is a very frustrating, like, we didn't do it once. We did it 3 times. And even though it was better, it just was never enough. So, huge kudos. I mean, that's a huge respect. That was day and night. And it was like, holy, and there comes the pro card. So that was very well done.
Oh, I appreciate it. And Brittany's somebody that she just, she makes it easy too, because, she's also like, she's just like, I'll get it done. What do you even need me to do? I get it done. And that's one thing I'll say about Brittany. Cause I mean, this, sometimes with certain clients, you have to play like half coach, half therapist.
Oh yes.
But like with Brittany, she was like, just put it on the paper and we'll just go for it. You know what I mean? And so, I think the biggest thing though is like, it's hard sometimes it was hard in those early days to get people to give me a chance. And now I definitely, especially with some of the younger guys I have coming up on the enhanced side, I definitely see some bigger momentum there and being able to like, take on that new challenge for myself, which sure. I love that challenge. You know what I mean? Like showing people, proving people wrong is kind of fun.
Oh, yeah. And make no mistake. I know I love doing it. I'll admit it. So it was kind of the roles are reversed, but there's nothing better than when a client comes to you and they haven't been able to get in that condition and they've worked with other coaches and then you get them there. It's kind of like, oh yeah, I hope you see this one. I mean, legit, like it is a very satisfying feeling. I do have a question about coaching and I don't want to go too deep into the coaching part, but something you just said made me think of this. And I think it's important for coaches to understand. So I'm not going to give it away, but I'm going to ask you this. When you work with your clients, are you pretty much matter of fact, boom, 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 or do you have a rapport with your clients?
I try to have a rapport. I think that the reason being, the rapport will be whatever they will want it to be or allow it to be, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I think that the reason I like to do that is because at some point, I'm going to ask them to do something that's uncomfortable for whatever reason. You know what I mean? Like when we're pushing hard or when they're struggling or they think they're losing muscle or not on time or whatever. I need them to trust that 1, I know what I'm doing, and 2, I have their best interests in this. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and the other thing too is, like you said, I think sometimes like getting a couple of cracks at a prep allows you to really hone things in. And so also I want the opportunity to stick with them. So I usually have a pretty good rapport with them, which is also why I don't like, some coaches will be like, fill out this spreadsheet. They'll be like, fill out this spreadsheet. I think sometimes clients will try to give me a spreadsheet and I'm like, no, you talk to me. Just tell me about your week. I don't want to see your spreadsheet because I want to know about you, the person.
I knew
So
what you were going to say. I literally knew it. And the reason I know it is because that's what, and I'm going to hurt some feelings with this one, but that's what the vast majority of good coaches do. Now, back in the day, it didn't need, like the message board days, it didn't need to be like that. You could literally shit on a client and they'd be like, oh, I'm just so really glad to work with you. It was a weird time. And then some of those coaches took that into, like, they didn't change the way they were doing things. And then all of a sudden, I'm not going to mention names because some of them I love, but then they're like, whoa, like I don't have results. Obviously, are at the top of the list with clients. That's a number one. No one can argue that.
Yeah.
But now we have so many people who they may not even be a great coach, but they can get the results. So then it comes down to the nuanced, okay, what am I providing for my client on top of the results? Obviously you have to have the trust factor. You walking the walk, I think is important, or have had walked the walk at some point so that it's relatable. You can, as a client, you know that your coach understands what you're feeling and you're able to go, okay, I know what you're going through. I've been there many times. So there's just a lot more. That rapport, I think, really, and this is for the coaches out there who want to be good coaches, it matters. The personal relationship matters. So if you're bitching about it, well, I don't want to hear about this. I want to hear everything, because if you're struggling or you're stressed, I want to know what's going on so that if things aren't going well, I have an idea why they might not be going well.
Yeah. And you nailed it too, is like, well, and then you got to find that balance too, because like some people now want phone calls every week or video calls every week. But to be honest with you, sometimes for me, I find, at least my own style, that hinders the process, because then it's like, if I get their face in front of me and I see how tired they are, I start questioning, are they going to be able to handle what I'm trying to throw at them?
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, and then I think they just start spewing like, I'm so hungry, I'm so tired. I'm like, I want you to write it because I want you to think about what you're telling me. So then it's like, it's hard to find that balance between like, I want it, but also think about what you're giving me. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, there are times where as a coach you'll be like, okay, now I just opened the floodgates. Like, what the fuck?
But you are absolutely right. I think it's like it is tough, because with coaching, you have to find this style that works for you and works for the person. And then the other thing too is, I think some coaches, I always tell people too, it's like their weekly check-in with you shouldn't feel like a negative in their life. You know what I mean? Like they shouldn't be dreading it. It shouldn't be a burden, because that's going to make them hide stuff from you. They're going to be eating extra, not telling you. They're going to be skipping check-ins because they're afraid to report to what you got. Like, as much as possible, I don't want them to dread my check-in.
Sure. Yeah. And that accountability, look, you do it long enough, you can read between the lines and be like, oh yeah. Yeah, I've made 5 diet changes. I literally have pushed your calories down so ridiculously low to make you go, okay, yeah, I'm pretty beat up. And you're like, no, everything's great. Everything's great, because this is not what you're doing. That's fine. And I could continue to go down this path, but I want to shift gears real quick. And I want to hear about rapid backloading. I don't know much about, but I've seen it on your page. I know it's gone back to I don't want to say the beginning, but it's been around. It's a method that you use, and I want to hear about it. I don't expect you to throw out, this detailed thing while I'm taking notes over here going, this is what this motherfucker's doing. Like, but I want to hear a little bit about it, because there's so many things like, the carb backloading, skip loading. There's a lot of loading. There's a lot of loadings, Cliff. What sets yours apart? What is it doing? What does it focus on? Throw me a bone.
Yeah. So with so when I first started coaching, at least on the natural side, almost everybody, it's most of the top coaches on the natural side when I first started, 2009.
Bigger gains don't come from guessing. My bodybuilding anatomy and meathead biomechanics 101 courses teaches you how muscles actually work, so you could train smarter, lift heavier, and grow without breaking down. Real anatomy, real biomechanics, real bodybuilders demonstrating every movement. This is the difference between lifting hard and lifting intelligently. Learn it once, use it forever. Get access now at theeducatedmeathead.com.
10, 11. They almost all had their PhDs. And a lot of them were writing extensive articles about the peaking styles they were using, and it was almost all a front load style. Carbs at the beginning, tapered down, and then maybe a slight refill at the end. I had tried it my first year of coaching, and it was okay. It was okay. Like, it was a predictable look. I'll say that.
Sure. Yeah.
But we've all seen that look where like a client has a big refeed or something like that, and it's just tight, tight, very dry look, veins popping out everywhere, and I was like, there's better. You know what I mean? Like there's better. There's a better look to be had.
Right.
I'm like, are we trying to win or are we trying not to lose? You know what I mean? And so I spent like a year just I would do mini tests on people, big refeeds here, big refeeds there. And there was already, and I think a lot of people on the enhanced side had been using the 3-day deplete, 3-day load type, backload type of thing, super compensation effect loads,
super safe.
yeah. And so super compensation was it was doable, but sometimes when I tested it, I felt like you almost looked best after the first day or two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then a day or two would still leave you not as full as you could be because it's just not enough time to load. It's not you're not loading enough. And so I was just like, if it makes sense, if we're depleting, our super compensation effect will be highest immediately, and then it's like once the carbs start coming in, your body's going to start making those corrections to minimize the super compensation. And I was like, what if I just do it all in one day? You know what I mean? So I was like, let's just do it all in one day. And I played around with sodium levels, potassium levels, everything I could do to enhance the timing of the load, like that glycogen synthesis, right? And I wanted it hitting like by stage time. And so, I would do, so then I did a trial run. It was actually almost 15 years ago to the day I did my first trial run.
Okay.
And it went out I think my first trial run, the guy only weighed about 158 pounds. I didn't do it in a show. I did it the first time. And I gave him like 950 grams of carbohydrates in one day. I gave him 6 grams of sodium and like 10 grams of potassium. And
nice.
And he was and 2 gallons of water.
Oh sure.
And he looked amazing the next day.
You got people right now going, what the what the, but it's just to not do that, to not add sodium with that amount of carbs and to not balance it would be nonsensical, but it seems counterintuitive to a lot of people.
And so I made a post after I did it, like hey, here's a trial run of a peak I did. I was proud of it, right? So I made a Facebook post or something like that, and I was like, here it is. And I remember even like some of the more established guys with their PhDs on the natural side were like, this doesn't really work, blah 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 blah. So like 2 months later, I was like, I'm gonna make a statement. I took 3 guys into the Mr. Natural Illinois show, and I rapid backloaded them all. And we had first place, second place, Masters winner, and teen winner. And I was like, and I was just like throwing it in everybody's face. I was like 900 carbs, 1200 carbs, 1000 carbs. I was like, you can't argue with these results right now.
Oh, but they did. I mean? Make no mistake, they still did. And that's why you just have to continue to replicate that result. But it takes a long time before people finally go, okay, there must be something to this.
Yeah. And so, so then it's like, I was a newer coach at that time, but it was like, okay, now I have, you build up your toolbox over the years, right? So it's like, so I had a front load if I needed something. If there was a situation where I just wasn't sure, a safe load would be a front load, right? If I knew I could knock it out of the park, I have a back load. And then it's like you start adding like 2-day loads to your arsenal and, all these, or like a back load with like a cleanup day right before the show if somebody tends to look a little sharper when food's actively coming down. But the rapid backload, once you know how the mechanics of it work, it does produce a very predictable look. People think it's like dangerous, they're like, oh, it's wild. You don't know what you're going to wake up to the next day. But I'm like, honestly, when the situation is right for it, it produces the most predictable look, in my opinion, of all the loads in my arsenal.
I think it seems like a gamble to someone who doesn't have the experience with it, has not seen it replicated time and time again. I know I've run into the same thing with skip loading, and it's funny, you made a good point. There isn't one way to do it.
Yep.
So as soon as someone hears about, well, it's rapid backloading, they just think that it's one process that you hand to somebody and you go do this. And it's like, no, that's not how it goes. There are always individual and very specific changes and tweaks that have to happen for each person.
I want to hop in real quick. You said something earlier about, ethnicities affecting coaching. Like, have you, now that you're coaching everybody, right? Have you found a difference? I would assume it's like electrolytes are different based on their racial history, or what are you finding?
Oh yeah. So and it's funny because I've kind of gotten I've yeah, I coach a good mix of ethnicities, and there are definitely, and you nailed it, like sodium intakes for black competitors versus white competitors usually quite a bit lower. And not always, but I find that a lot of black competitors look better with food or carbs actively coming down or being lower. I have suspected that there's this so with a lot of white competitors, I find that you load them and they look harder and then they look fuller and harder, right? So it's like this with a lot of black competitors, it's like you load them and they kind of look softer and then even softer and then harder and fuller. Um so I suspect there's like this like transient period where, you know, carb consumption, digestive tract, and for like a lot of like lighter skin competitors, it's digestion and almost straight into glycogen synthesis. But with a lot of black competitors, I think it's consumption, digestion, and then I think that glucose just floats in the interstitial spaces, waiting for glycogen synthesis to happen, drawing water to it. So a lot of black competitors, I won't load them and then step them right on stage. It's like you load them and then you gotta let their body like rest a little bit, let the muscle uptake that glucose, and then they're crisp and hard and ready to go.
And then you're obviously like doing test runs during prep, correct?
Yeah, I sometimes not test at this point. Early in my career, I drove my clients crazy with this stuff. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. I would be like, okay, I want you to we're gonna do a big refeed day, and I'd be like, I want pictures the day before, the morning of, midday, night, the next day. I mean, the pictures, and I would log them all, and like, I'd have a client, and I'd be like, here's Mike, flat, half full, full, spilled. I would spill them on purpose even and be like, I want to see what the spill looks like.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, that is the bodybuilding coach's equivalent of watching game film. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Like some coaches, I don't think they analyze photos enough. And I'm like, would you want a quarterback running your team that doesn't watch game film? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now I feel like I've coached it enough to where I can see how it looks after the refeed day. You know what I mean? Like I know the look. But even perfect example, this past year at the Natural Bodybuilding World Championships, I had the first place. I had the Natural Bodybuilding World Champion. He won the heavyweight class and then the overall. And then I had the middleweight winner, and he took third. So I had first and third in the natural world. And the heavyweight guy, he's Mexican, and he kind of a lighter skinned, and he had 750 grams of carbs the day before. And the middleweight winner is dark skinned, and he had 0 carbs the day before. I had loaded him 2 days before a little bit, and then so they placed near the top of the world, and just 2 drastically different approaches for their peak weeks.
So I don't want to beat this down, but I'm trying to understand, and this may be a question that you can't answer, but what is it? I don't say biological, but what is it at the cellular level that is different when I know it's a hard, and I'm sorry to ask that because
I've got a theory.
Do you? I want to hear it because
Cliff, do you have one?
I at the cellular level,
not at the cellular level.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I've suspected. I mean, first off, sometimes I've talked about this before. People are like, "Are you implying that there's difference?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, our ancestors' environments were strong enough to change our skin pigment. You don't think it's strong enough to change our
and that's a good point. That's a good point.
Like the environment matters. So I also think that if people's ancestors lived in places where there's food scarcity, slow or fast metabolic rates just won't survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and especially if, I think also if carbohydrates are maybe lower in those areas or is it more scarce in those areas, the ability to process those, particularly at fast rates, probably just would not have developed. So that's probably, so that's probably my take, but I don't know.
And my theory is like my ancestors lived in areas where there's winter, so they had to can food for the winter. And then folks near the equator never had to can anything, so they're not used to high sodium meals, right? So, because I've noticed there's a huge difference between races, and that's not saying it's not it's just a statement. It's not being like judgmental or anything.
it's
You
an
do it long
observation,
enough.
sure.
Yeah. Like if you give two people of different ethnicities the 6 grams of sodium and 10 grams of potassium, you're probably going to have totally different outcomes. But did everybody notice there was more potassium than sodium?
I know, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody caught that either.
Yes, yeah. And the other thing too is I think that a lot of black competitors in general are just more prone to water retention. The kidney filtration rates of black competitors just seem to be a lot slower. So it's like sometimes if you want to, eliminate some of that water retention, it seems like they're just sensitive to all solutes, right? Like, give them glucose, you give them sodium, everything's just going to cause some water retention. So I think everything just needs to be a little bit lower.
And for anybody listening, please understand that we're not making blanket statements here. This is, it's not like, well, this person's white, this is how it has to be done. But that you've seen in your observations over all these clients, over all these years, that this is what tends to happen. So I'm kind of watching for this might be a question you can't answer too. Where do I fall in there, Cliff?
Yeah, well, it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum, so you got everything in between.
I make the joke only because obviously not obviously because people may not know I lie and say I'm French Polynesian just to get rid of the questions, but I'm 65% German. So despite the tan, anybody who's listening, well, I wonder where Skip falls on this spectrum. I'm pretty sure I fall on the really white with the blue veins, going through me when I don't have a tan. So
my first 2 clients ever were black, and and I'm about as pale as you can get, right? And I remember at first I tried doing with them what I was doing, and it was not working. Like within 2 months, I was like, and then here's the other thing. I was reading a lot of studies, and then the studies were kind of aligning with what I was noticing worked with myself. But let's be honest, most studies continue even to be done on like elderly, or white college frat bros because the universities are like, hey, we're putting out a weight training study, and all the frat guys are like, we'll take part in a weight training study. So it worked on me, and then I was trying it with them, and I was like, okay, and I was honest with them. I was like, listen, this clearly isn't working. Do you know what I mean? Like, let me switch gears, and they were patient with me, and we switched gears, and things took off after that. So I think that's the other thing too, is like both on the natural side and the enhanced side, I think the industry has gotten really stuck in this loop where they don't want to try anything unless someone has pre-approved it, right? You have the scientific minded guys where they're like, I don't want to do anything that's not been proven by the research. And I'm like, okay, are you looking for information or permission? Right. And the other ones, on the more, the bro side, they're like, well, I saw, this shows my age a little bit too. They're like, I don't want to do it because Ronnie Coleman or Jay Cutler doesn't do it, or they said they don't like that, and they won't do it unless somebody that they view as the authority has already approved it. And I'm like, be brave, try something. You know what I mean? If it doesn't work out, try something different. You know what I mean?
Is there something to be said of if a lot of people do something and the outcome is good or predictable, it's going to be backed up at some point if it's not already in some study anyway. It's just kind of I'm not anti-study, don't get me wrong, but I've been around long enough that I don't need studies to tell you. Skip loading is a good example. There was nothing. We didn't even know about ghrelin leptin at that point. And if you asked me how it worked, I'd be like, like I can't explain to you how it works because on paper, it just doesn't work. The math doesn't math. So to hear you even say, well, this guy weighed 156 pounds and I think it was 156, but it was in there somewhere. And he's taking in 1,000 grams of carb. If anyone's listening, doing the math, like, wow, that's impossible. That can't happen. And yet it does. We just may not be to the point where we can explain it yet, or it hasn't been studied because we aren't doing studies on trained individuals and especially competitive bodybuilding.
And it's funny because when I first started, a lot of people would kind of accuse me of being this science nerd, because I would try to at least explain everything with at least scientific rationale, right? And then now I've gotten to be, I haven't, changed my approach. I've changed tactics, but and now I'm like this like total bro meathead because the industry has shifted so far to the side. But my dad he's retired now, a PhD plant pathologist.
Oh, okay.
And even though I don't have my advanced degree or anything like that, he, you know, I come from a family of scientifically minded individuals. And I remember he said something to me when I was young that stuck with me. And he was saying, because he would do work in the lab and he would do work in the literal field because he's a plant pathologist. And he would say, you know, sometimes by the time a study has been done on something, somebody's been doing it in the field for already 10 to 20 years.
Right.
He's like, you know, by the time it's proven, because the only reason somebody thought to test it is because somebody's been doing it. And so that kind of stuck with me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, there are people who need to be pushing methodology forward first before the science comes along and decides to test the efficacy of it.
Sure.
So,
And then on the other spectrum, we know it takes 17 years for something to be put out in a study in a textbook to come common practice in that field. So you've got two totally different ends of the spectrum. But I want to go back to, we talked about building rapport with your clients. Can we give Cliff a shout out that those two gentlemen early on stayed with him while he was figuring it out?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
will not happen if you're not building a relationship with your clients.
Yep. Trust is huge.
Yeah. And that's the thing I try to also convey to my clients is, I mean, we were talking about it before the camera went on. Too many people are coaching because they want the money or the notoriety or whatever. My clients know I want to bring the best. Do you know what I mean? Like I when you know, there's a lot that goes on with winning and losing that's kind of out of our control, right? You know, the judges, who shows up, the lighting, whatever. But at the end of the day, I want all of my clients getting on stage at their absolute best. And I think when my clients see the words that I write, hear me speak, they know that's all I care about. Like, I don't care about anything else. Like, we're just going to bring our absolute best, and then the judges have to do their job. But you know, I think that rapport matters because they know I'm not about the money. I'm not about, you know, this or that. I'm about, let's just get the job done. Let's execute.
And at the end of the day, what else can you do other than show up in your best condition? And at least then, in your best condition, accept that, you know what? That guy was better than me. Like, I need to work harder. I need to work longer. And you know what? Maybe I didn't pick my parents right. Maybe he picked his parents a little bit better than I did. But I mean, my point is just that standing on stage in your best condition really, and it's not always okay with people. I know I have taken huge hits where I'm like, you're in the best condition you've ever been in. You've been happy with how everything goes. What do you want me to Jeff Galooly the guy backstage? That's an old reference that not very many people get, and I'm not going to explain it. So you either get it or you don't. But I can't tell you where you're going to fall. And if you take second and you're like, oh, this is devastating to me and it's a giant failure, bro, you're in the wrong sport. This is a marathon. And I don't want to get into the generational thing, but there is a difference. The older generation loves the process and doesn't necessarily want to see it end tomorrow. You know, there is a downfall to getting a pro card, especially if you're not very good. You might never be competitive again. You might never win again. Not everybody, but kind of, you know, like you're rushing to the finish line and you get over the finish line, you're like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. And now I'm essentially, I suck again. I'm not going to ever win again. I mean, think about, careful what you wish for, I guess. I'll end it there, I guess, but.
Yeah. You know, I had the overall winner at the Amateur Olympia about a year and a half ago. He won his IFBB pro card at the Amateur Olympia, and he won the overall as a heavyweight. But you know, he just made his pro debut a couple weeks ago, and it's like, we added 12 pounds in the year and a half. We came in leaner, but he still finished near the bottom of his class because I'm like, hey man, we're starting this process over again now. You know what I mean?
Like it's a new world.
And he was ready for it, and he knows it. But it's like, you know, I think that's the thing too, is like, I think sometimes getting a pro card too early is like a death sentence for some people's competitive career, because then they're like, oh my God, how many years do I have to work towards trying to be relevant again? You know?
Agreed. I want to shift gears a little bit if you're okay with this, Dr. Marv. I want to talk a little bit about your training. First, I want to touch on this. What are your thoughts on the differences in training, if there are any, if you feel there are any, between the natural competitors or natural trainers and the geared up community or the geared up trainers? Should the training look different? If so, how?
You know, I think of all the metrics, the arena, or of all between diet and training and peaking. I think training actually has the most similarities from the natural side to the enhanced side. There are a few differences. Like, so for example, there have been times where if somebody's on cycle, you have to be aware of, is that connective tissue keeping up with the pace, right?
Good point.
So be a little aware of that, but for the most part, I find that, so people are like, oh, if somebody's on gear, you can bump up the training volume and the intensity. I'm like, yeah, but the loads they're using, they just naturally increase, right? So you're increasing, so the load is kind of matching that increased recovery ability anyway. You know what I mean? So the volume ends up being pretty steady across the board. Like I found, like I've had instances where I've coached somebody when they were natural and then they went the enhanced route, and it's like the program, we were like, let's try this one again, and the program ends up working out perfectly because they're just using heavier weights, which it kind of like sucks up all that additional recovery ability now. And so I find that that's pretty similar. I'll maybe time some of the higher, with both diet and training, I'll time some of it a little bit differently based on whether or not they're on cycle or off cycle. But for the most part, the volumes tend to equate pretty nicely across, just because of the increased load they're handling sucks up all that recovery ability.
And I think at the end of the day, it still just comes down to recovery. You're going to recover better. So maybe you could train more frequently, but at the same time, I think it's more recovery, instead of saying, I don't think there's any blanket statements that can be made. And I've asked a lot of guys this, Albert Nunez, GVS, things like that, or guys like that. And you don't see a difference in training volume. You don't see a difference in intensity, maybe frequency, but I just need to ask more people. I've trained naturally. I mean, believe it or not, I was natural for quite a while. And when I say natural, I'm always careful because someone will bust me. They know everything about me because I've been talking for years. Yes, I messed with gear. And to be clear, I wasn't natural, but 6 weeks of 250 milligrams of testosterone cypionate when you're 16 really isn't. Now, I'm not trying to take away from it, but I'm just saying this isn't like big cycle. And then I hit 2 cycles when I was 19. So yes, I was not natural. And at the same time, I wasn't loading up on gear like I was right around 2000. So I know a little bit. And then I went, 10, 11 years without any gear through my 20s. So I still, from a natural standpoint, I wasn't technically natural. I'm not going to claim that, but there's the training and everything. Certainly I couldn't treat myself like I was on gear. I wasn't getting the response that I would get on gear. I wasn't getting the growth, the increased recovery ability, that sort of thing. So I can contrast those relatively well to being on a lot of gear versus a little bit of gear when I was a teenager and then none when I was 20. And I just don't see much of any difference from a training standpoint. That doesn't mean that other people don't. That's why I like to ask the question. But that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I find what matters more is the person I'm working with, rather than whether or not they're on something. Like I even have a young guy right now he's that deadly combination of ridiculously good genetics and really good work ethic and, level-headed between the ears. And, he's enhanced, and he's one of the few people where I was like, he was growing so fast, I really did start to worry about injury. I was like, and I even told him, I was like, just because he was he was growing so fast, he was getting stretch marks, and then they were actually, when you would get a pump, they would split and bleed.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, and I was like, let's take a couple of weeks and just like keep the load the same and let your body catch up a little bit. And I was like, but also he was like 20 years old and won an overall NPC show as a natural.
Oh, okay.
And so like his training volume is often higher than even like, you know what I mean? Like his training volume as a natural and his intensity and the loads he's using would be rivaling guys that have been on gear for years. You know what I mean? Like he's just a freak. And so it's like, I think the person I'm working with oftentimes matters more than whether or not they're natural or enhanced.
Yeah, fair enough. Curious your thoughts on the big 3. Natural or unnatural, strictly from a bodybuilding standpoint: hypertrophy, squat, deadlift, bench press. thoughts?
Just from hypertrophy?
Yeah.
I love deadlifting. It's fun to pull a bunch of weight, but over the years I've kind of changed my stance on that because I think it's good when you're younger, to build some solid thickness in your back and low back traps, glutes, hamstrings. But I think that especially as you become a little bit more established, I don't think it is worth the nervous system recovery hits that it takes. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of a jack of all trades, but master of none.
I like
and so
that.
it's like, man, everything is training. I could break that down in some different exercises and target all of these areas real specifically without you just being totally destroyed the next day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I've taken deadlifts quite a bit of a step down in terms of that. And as far as squats go, I think I like assuming someone can do it, because not every movement's right for everybody. I like lunges even more than squats. I think because lunges even more so, somebody has long femurs, squats are a tough movement for them. They need to bend over quite a bit. Sometimes I think it's difficult, but like with a lunge, you can kind of like put the weight a little more towards the front of the foot or the back of the foot, and they can angle themselves. There's ways to contort the body on a lunge that give you a lot more freedom to really hit. You want to hit the quad more, you want to hit the glute more, you want to stretch the glute more. A lot of variation on the lunges. So I would say that's become my other favorite on those two. So I guess I'm mostly left with bench press.
Right. And Dr. Marv, I know you were excited when he said lunge just because of that additional, that stability, that isolateral type movement. Oh, wait, Dr. Marv, that's a left, right movement. Ooh.
Yeah.
It's an inside joke there, Cliff. I'm taking a shot at Marv. He takes shots at me. We have fun with it. Yeah, that's and I agree with you. Here's where I am with the squat dead, and I'm old enough to be able to say that I've come full circle with them a little bit. I believe as you do. When you're younger, that strength and power base, if you will, and the building of all the stabilizers so that as you do get bigger and stronger, you don't have weak stabilizers because you've been squatting on a Smith machine forever or haven't been doing any isolateral work in the lower body. Because outside of lunges and Bulgarian squats, Bulgarian squats came around, 8 years ago? Before that, we just had lunges and they didn't get done very often, other than the Ronnie Coleman age where we go, oh, he got huge on that, I'm going to do that. So there's not a lot of isolateral training in there. So when you get to those bigger numbers, you can have some big problems. I had a PCL. Who has a PCL issue from squatting? Skip, that type. So those types of things woke me up. So what I see is I see the benefit early on, and then I agree with the shift to get away from them, especially if you're a higher level competitor, you're arguably a pro, or you're trying to turn pro. You don't want to deal with injuries when there could be other lower risk options without having to increase the risk issue, I guess. And then you get to my age where I go, oh, I'm not doing any posterior chain work here. So I need to be smart so that I'm not hunched over a walker with tennis balls on it. And I make a joke about it, but we do have Ronnie. I don't think that his situation I think it was exacerbated by the training, but I don't think it created it. I think he had a genetic hereditary type issue in there that the training exacerbated. Do I know? I don't, but I don't believe that heavy training is 100% why he's in the situation that he is. I could be wrong.
No. So here's the story, because I was always like hating on his surgeon because I didn't know any better. He would get his back fused, and then a couple weeks later, he was putting 500-600 pounds on his back against surgeons' recommendations. So he refused to pull back when he needed to following major surgery. That's what caused
There's a huge
issue.
lesson. There's a huge takeaway. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But my point, just coming back to the posterior work, and I'm doing belt squats and things because of injuries that I've had in the past that I'm trying to get around. So then I notice, oh my God, my posterior chain is going to be shit. So I do add them back in a bodybuilding type of situation where they are higher reps. I'm not pushing huge strength, but I want some strength there. So I'll finish my leg training with some light squats just so that there is that balance and stability, and finish my back workout with rack pulls. So it's kind of come full circle for me.
Yeah, you nailed something though. It's like training, depending on your stage, matters. I see. Well, gosh, we keep saying, I hope this doesn't make us sound like old geezers in the bodybuilding industry, but like, I see like there's this big trend right now with Instagram where it's like, try this new movement, and it's a very hyper that people will film themselves in doing these movements, which are not bad movements, but they're hyper specific, right? And I'll even include some of those in my clients' programs. Like sometimes I have clients where they really need lower lats, right? And I'll be like, here's how you target the lower lats, and I have them doing this really specific, one arm cable row, leaning forward, and it's like, if you've only been training 2 years, stop fussing with that.
Yeah,
row
right.
it. Do you know what I mean? Like row it.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that like that doesn't have maybe it doesn't have its place occasionally in a younger person's program, but for the most part, I need you to be able to, like, I have a younger client right now. He just doesn't want to squat. And he's like, well, I don't feel it, with this. I'm like, I think you need to be able to become proficient at just squatting down and standing up. You know what I mean? Like, and he just wants to use machines for everything. And I think that is, and I also think that being able to learn how to move your body matters when it comes to stage time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
because you can spot when you tell somebody to hit a front double bicep pose, a rear lat pose, front lat, you can see who has spent a lot of time thinking about and practicing moving their body.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? When I tell people, well, I want you to retract your scapula, I want you to raise your shoulder dribble up or put it down, you can see who can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, who has
And I'm
that
like,
muscle control?
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see people pose and I'm like, I don't think they've given any thought or practice to moving their body. It's just machines over and over again. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's always hard. Long story short, I think it's hard trying to strike that balance between, I don't want you to analyze so much that you have paralysis by analysis and you don't like just go in there, and sometimes you just got to go in there and be aggressive, but also not mindless aggression either. It's like,
Yeah.
where do you find that middle ground,
Controlled chaos.
right? Yeah.
So, all right, Cliff, an 18-year-old comes to you. He's never trained. He wants to take it as far as he can. What would be your like ideal, like, all right, years 1 through 3, you're going to focus on this. Years 3 through 6, you're going to focus on that, right? Like, how do you walk somebody through going from beginner to more advanced?
So if they've never trained before, I mean, I'm
Mhm.
probably going to start with just more moderate rep ranges to begin with, so we're not like putting loads on there that they can't handle. I always say like the first 5 years of someone's training program, I like to really just see a heavy emphasis on progressive overload through adding weight to the bar.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you just get stronger because it's the easiest way. It's right there for the taking. Now the rep ranges in which I'm going to make that happen, I'll vary it. So I'll start more in the moderate, but then I'll start pushing some heavier weights. You can even go down to the 4 to 6, maybe even a few powerlifting programs peppered in too. And then I do like some high rep work. If I could kind of sidebar, I think high rep work builds some neurological efficiency. If I could use myself as an example, it's not a coincidence that my chest is small and my triceps are big. I played basketball all those years. Everything in basketball is a triceps extension, right? I'm shooting, I'm dribbling, I'm just extending my arm. I was skinny, but I'd run through that motion thousands and thousands of times. So it's not a coincidence when I went to do a cable extension, my body's like, oh, I know this move, triceps extension, right? Once I put a load on that movement, my triceps were very neurologically inclined to activate. But then the problem is I go onto a bench press and my body's like, oh, I know this move, triceps extension, right?
We're going to take over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I like high rep work when I can already tell somebody's going to have a weaker muscle group. So I kind of like get extra reps on that weaker muscle group to get them. I think it'll make their heavy work more effective in the future. So, but then once you start getting to 6, 7, 8 years of training, right, you start to see the slowdown of that progressive overload, where then I think you can tinker with more volume in areas that need it. You can probably start playing around with some intensity techniques if needed as well. And then it's funny, you start getting to 10 plus years of training, then it's like you need to really, really bear down on form improvements and engagement improvements. I always say like this progression, if you look at dumbbell lateral raises, right? People may walk into the gym and they're lateral raising like 15 pounders, and then they go 20, 25, and then it's like they get up to 45 pounders, 50 pounders even. And then at some point they're like, I probably need to drop back down to the 25s or the 30s. You know what I mean? Because then, because the thing is, after a while, it's almost like you make these slight concessions to beat the logbook and get stronger, where you aren't using the target muscle group as much as you were even 10 pounds ago. So it's almost like the bar may be progressively overloading, but the target muscle is like almost progressively deloading.
Yeah.
So I would like to see a re-emphasis on form and trying new form tactics. And so I kind of come back full circle with certain muscle groups. I'll try to lighten it up and try new ways of hitting it. So it's kind of the arc I like to see over the course of someone's career.
I think experience with training makes us not even consciously perform the exercises more efficiently and more optimally. And I think that is, and it almost needs to happen because we can't increase strength in perpetuity anyway. So I think that people tend to make those changes with form and mechanics once they start to see that strength leveling off a little bit. Until it levels off, good luck getting them to focus more on the mechanics and slowing things down, that type. So, it's almost there as not a safety valve, but in a sense, so that you're just not going to continue to fight those poundages.
I pepper it in early in people's programs too, like early in their career. I'll do some sets, I have some people do sets of 20 where we go slow. Once again, to kind of increase that neurological engagement. Because once again, for my chest as an example, because when people have a weak muscle group that they're not they say somebody wants a big back and they go find the guy in the gym with the biggest back and they're like, what did you do for it? And he's like, heavy barbell rows. And I'm like, for somebody that really can't feel their back, they have trouble engaging their back. I can't think of much worse than a heavy barbell row. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But and then they always want to add volume to it. So if they're not if volume is not landing on the target muscle group, and then they're like, it's a weak area, I need to add more volume. An analogy I always use is they're trying to fire a cannon from a canoe, right? They fire they fire the cannon and the canoe flips over. And they're like, clearly we need a bigger cannon. And I'm like,
I love that.
And so I'm like, why don't we stabilize this foundation, which is the engagement first, right?
Yeah.
The engagement first, then if we need a bigger cannon, we can go for it. Do you know what I mean? But the engagement foundation needs to be there.
I think it could be said that if you're not feeling a muscle group and your answer is to increase volume, you're increasing the volume because you're not targeting that muscle group effectively. It's like, don't add the volume, focus on trying to get into and hit that muscle. And target it better.
And I'm guilty of that. Early in my career, right? My chest wasn't growing, and I'm just like, well, just go more volume.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are my front delts and triceps getting so huge? You know what I mean?
My triceps are great. I have one more question before we go to intimate time, and I'm kind of pressing it, and I apologize. So we don't need to go down, too deep into it. But I don't know if you have any experience with this, but I have to ask because it's on my brain right now, and I am hyper focused on it. I'm not going to give you my opinions on it. I got to ask you yours first. What are your thoughts on Retatrutide and other GLP GIPs in relation to the condition or anything that you're seeing strictly from competitors, not the average person, because they're never going to say anything bad, and they may not see anything bad, but the competitors, I'm wondering if you're seeing anything, whether it be flatness, whether it be condition, whether it be eating up muscle tissue. Are you seeing anything with the use of these compounds?
Yeah, I think it can make people a little flat, in my opinion. I don't think people have as quite of a full look on them. I'm going to sound like a total hippie, and I try not to come off sound like a hippie, but sometimes I really want people to, because a lot of times at the end of the day, it's they're trying to get themselves to stick to the plan, right?
Yeah.
I try to make sure I would rather see them work on their mind. You know what I mean? I really would rather see them do that work. I'm like, we don't want to skip the hard part because I do think it makes them flatter. A small thing with working on your mind is a thing that I'll always say is like, what does that hunger feel like? What does that craving feel like? It feels like dangerous, right? It feels dangerous. Like if that's not, but it feels urgent and dangerous. And I'm like, it's because for most of human history, hunger was urgent and dangerous. You're going to die if you don't eat.
Yeah. Survival.
Yeah. But I'm like, take 5 seconds, take some deep breaths and remind yourself, it's time to reconcile what you feel, which is this is dangerous, with what you know this is not dangerous. You know what I mean? Bring them together and be like, I got another meal coming in an hour and a half. I'm going to be just fine. You know what I mean? Go, you know what I mean? Like, I would rather see you, you know, for some reason, when it comes to diet, it's different. They're like, how do I stop being hungry? I don't hear any bodybuilder say, how do I get huge without putting more weight on the bar?
Right.
You know what I mean? With the diet, people will say, how do I get shredded without ever feeling hungry or discomfort? I'm like, I want to see you learn to deal with it. You know what I mean? Because I think that taking those things has a drawback on the physique that you have, and you're trying to short step the hard part of this sport. So, you know what I mean? Like, let's do the psychological work to get you there. And I want you tougher, and we're not going to try to shortchange this process. That's my take.
And I think that signal is important. I think that hunger signal, I should be more clear, sorry, but that hunger signal, we need to feel that hunger in relation to the level of depletion.
Yeah, good point.
It's almost like we're taking out a really important variable by justifying saying, well, I can't. And look, this is the truth, and I'll piss people off when I say this, but there are some people who are just not going to get shredded without it. I get that. And if you have to use it, if that is your obstacle between getting shredded and not getting shredded, I guess, okay, to each their own. I'm very much to each their own. What I don't like is I'm also seeing not only the impact of being flat, but the long-term use of it still slowly Pac-Manning away muscle tissue like Pac-Man eats dots. It just takes longer. So I go back to the studies and I say, well, 40% of people who lose weight on these GLPs, it's muscle. And then the industry is quick to go, well, that's because they're lazy and they don't weight train and they don't have a good diet. I'm not saying that's not true. But then what we have done as an industry by responding that way is saying that it doesn't happen to us because we take gear, arguably, but not if you're natural, but take gear, and then we have a higher protein intake and we have a better diet. I'm saying, why did we jump straight to that instead of thinking that maybe we're just minimizing that loss of muscle tissue, gear, no gear, eating well, eating enough protein, but it takes longer. And I have seen it play out with me. And then I thought, oh, it took me a long time to figure it out. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm putting up numbers at 5 weeks out that I've not put up since my injuries in 2020. How is it that I look like I literally, if I taped my legs, I lost 1.5 inches?
Yeah,
so then I start processing or questioning the process of the dieting, the cardio. I'm like, oh my God, I am doing more cardio. I usually don't need this much cardio. It's eating up muscle. It just took me a long time to figure it out. And then, not because of me, it's important that I say I'm not judging my opinion on Reta simply because of me. So I start looking at my clients and I'm starting to see the same damn thing. So I'm questioning. I'm not saying that the compound is useless. What I'm questioning is duration. I was on it for about 1.5 years. Did not see anything ever. I thought it was the greatest thing. I'm like, wow, this is easy. Like, I'm increasing my calories. I'm losing body fat. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
Don't look as full, but okay. Until I could contrast those pictures. I don't want to go too deep into this because I've told the story 1,000,000 times, but I'm seeing it with clients too. And in speaking with other coaches, they're going, damn, you might have something here. So I made the prediction. We'll find out that I think as an industry as early as the end of this year, but into next year, we're going to start really pulling back on the use of Reta from a competitor standpoint, because people are going to finally start to say, oh, I want to be in their ear. I want them to think of me, not because I need the attention, but because and I might be wrong. I might end up where people go, nah, he's crazy.
No, I think you're right.
What's he think?
I think you're right.
It's there. I really think it's there.
You know, and that's an interesting difference between the natural side and the enhanced side, because, you know, I work with both. With natural competitors, sometimes I need to convince them to have a sense of urgency, right? Because they're like, you know, I've got, you know, natural competitors' careers tend to be a little longer, you know, their primes. And so they're like, I got 20.
So is their life.
Yeah. And they're like, I got 25 years to do this. I'm like, well, yeah, but if you ever want to reach your best, like, we need to move. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't be casual in this. I always say, act with urgency, but wait for results with patience. And so, And so, like, let's do this. And then sometimes with the enhanced side, there's a reason each path chose, each person chose that different path. But the enhanced side, sometimes I'm like, let's slow down and build these skills. You know what I mean? Let's slow down and build these skills, because you're never going to be the best version of yourself as a bodybuilder until you have the skills that are worthy of a champion physique.
It's good. That's a good point. Good point. Appreciate you accepting that topic. Like I said, I don't even know if, are GLPs, GIPs, like I won't say Reta because it's not FDA approved, but is that part of natural bodybuilding? I mean, it could be. No. I don't know. Okay.
No, they don't let you take them. Okay. I think unless you have diabetes, I think they give you an exemption for it, but I haven't had that situation yet. Okay. But and each natural federation has their own different kind of, differences of the rules. But yeah, they don't allow them.
Okay. I think it's going to end up probably in the natural federations to be much like the policy at Publix where you can't take your dog, but I walk in there and I see 3 dogs.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, there's a policy here, but you are not doing it and they're not enforcing it. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking out loud. Dr. Marv, I don't want to take too much more time. Do you want to jump? Do you have anything to add, or do you want to jump into intimate time?
No, I think this was a great conversation. For what it's worth, Cliff, when my one patient was like, hey, I'm thinking about hiring a coach. And I said, who are you hiring? He's like, Cliff. And then one other person, I was like, you're hiring Cliff. Don't even.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I walked along the avenue. I never thought I'd meet a girl like you.
It's intimate time with Cliff Wilson.
Yes.
Let's dig in. Okay. It can't be related to bodybuilding.
What is intimate time? Explain this to me. Sorry.
Okay. What it is 10 questions for our guests that are not related to the industry at all. It can't be about picking up heavy things and setting them down. It can't be about chicken and rice. It has to be just questions outside of the industry so that not only myself and Dr. Marv, but the listeners can get a little bit better insight of what Cliff Wilson is like outside of the industry.
All right, let's do it.
You want it, Dr. Marv? You want to take it first?
Sure. I always ask the deep stuff, so get ready.
I don't. I'm very simple, Cliff.
So, Cliff, if you could instantly master any skill completely unrelated to fitness, what would it be and why?
Master? I really enjoy chess. I think I would like to master chess.
All right.
I started 5 years ago, and I always knew how to play, but there's a difference between I know how to play and I actually can work tactics and know where I'm heading. So I've enjoyed it because much like figuring out bodybuilding, it's hard, and I would really like to master and have that sight in that arena.
Fair enough. Well, that says a lot about another difference between Cliff and I. I'm a tic-tac-toe guy, and I'm gonna win. All right, now number 2. Who wears the pants in your marriage relationship? I put / because honestly, I don't know if you're married or not. I was supposed to ask you before we started.
Oh,
and I had to add, don't lie, because I might forward the link.
Oh my goodness!
To your wife.
Your followers may find this entertaining. I've been divorced twice, but I am good friends with both of my ex-wives. In fact, I just had everybody over along with my daughter over like 2 nights ago. We all get together. And my first ex-wife is my business partner / assistant. So I'm very close with everybody.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm still very close with everybody, so we're just good friends. But I'm single. I have no I have a girlfriend at this point, but I don't think either of us are wearing the pants at this point because I'm wearing shorts all the time.
Okay, so I won't send her the link because you first said you were single and then said you had a girlfriend.
Well,
yeah.
Single.
What the
single? Yeah. Single meaning no longer married, I guess.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had. And I had a work, and we had a work thing with my girlfriend and my ex-wife the other day. So it's a very.
Did they get along?
What?
Did they get along?
They get along too, and both of my ex-wives get along too.
Oh, Cliff, you got to
interesting.
This. Anyway, go ahead, Marv. Take the next question before I elaborate or expound.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Yeah. You guys are like, where are we going with that?
Yeah, teach me the ways.
Let's go down that path.
Number 3, what is something about you that would surprise most people who only know you from social media?
Honestly, that I was probably the answer to the previous question, but no. The fact that I did play basketball. Most people don't realize that I played basketball. I was pretty good in high school and college. I played for one of the top 50 high school AAU teams in high school, and played against a lot of guys that went to the NBA. I'm 50 age now. I was in LeBron James's class, so we played against LeBron James's team and stuff like that. So yeah, it was.
Were you a guard?
I was. By the time I went to college, it was one of those things where it was like I was almost 6'2", so I was kind of on the short side. I was a guard. Yeah.
Okay. It says a lot when you say 6'2" and on the short side, but I understand enough about the sport that you're right.
I went to basketball. I was in basketball. I was too short. I go to bodybuilding. I'm too tall. I probably should play baseball or something.
Right. Passionate about basketball. Passionate about bodybuilding. It's like maybe I should have found something more that would have fit better. But our passions are our passions, right?
We love
and you've been good at it, make no mistake. All right, Dr. Marv drives a Mustang. I drive an M5. What do you own that you would line up next to us to race, and who wins?
Oh, I am not much of a car guy, so I have a Hyundai Elantra. And it's a good thing you asked that question now, because up until like a month ago, I was driving a Ford Focus.
I'm pretty sure I could beat the Focus. I don't know if I can beat Dr. Marv, but it would be fun nonetheless.
Okay, if you had to live in one place for the rest of your life that you've already visited, where would that be?
Oh gosh.
Don't say Ohio. Don't.
No. I visited for a seminar I was giving Greece.
Ooh.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful there. It was wonderful. So I would choose Greece.
Nice.
Yeah, that's let me ask you this real quick. Were you going on vacation there and you thought, I better just do a couple seminars to pay for this? Or did you actually set up the seminar and then turn it into a vacation?
So that was the first time I ever spoke out of the country. And they invited me to speak. And I was like, you sure I have anybody that follows me in Greece? I was like, last thing I want to do is fly halfway across the world and have like one person in the audience being like, woo,
I didn't care who showed up, because that's what I did. We were going to Jamaica, and I'm like, well, I'm going to do some seminars there, and I'm going to write some of this off because it's a business trip. That's the only reason I asked.
Early on in my speaking, like I had been coaching and I tried doing a couple of speaking engagements, and my first two, I did them locally, and I didn't have much of a turnout. And then I just happened to get booked at a seminar where John Meadows was speaking. And I did my talk, and John came up to me and was like, that was one of the best talks I've heard in 20 years. And I was like, I didn't know if I should keep going with it because it hasn't gone well. He goes, you're going to pay for your family's vacations one day. And,
I like that.
And he was absolutely right. I'm taking my daughter to Denmark later this year for one of my speaking engagements. And so John was absolutely spot on with that.
That's awesome. I would go down that rabbit hole with John, but once I do, it's 20 minutes. The guy I'll tell you this. The industry in the world needs more guys like him, and it just sucks that we get stuck with the shitty ones who stay around forever, and the good ones exit early. It sucks. It really does.
I know. John was kind enough also to write the foreword for my bodybuilding book that I wrote.
Oh, nice.
And he's just a great guy.
Okay, I gotta ask every client this, or every guest this, because apparently clients are on my mind. Sorry, Cliff. Because I'm a horophile. I don't know that you are, but a horophile, you like fine watches. Do you have a watch? Do you wear a watch outside of the gym that is not a Fitbit or an Apple Watch? And if you do, what is it?
I don't wear a watch. I've
only had one. I've only had one guy. That's okay. I always have to ask.
I am, as evidenced by my Ford Focus comment, I'm like as minimalist as you can possibly get, probably.
All right.
Well, speaking of being minimalist, what is one purchase under $100 that has made your life significantly better?
Can we circle back to that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me think on that one. Yeah, let me think on that. Okay.
If you're not a prep coach and you have to have a job that is not at all related to the industry, what would your dream job be? It doesn't matter about education. Like, you could just be good tomorrow. You don't have to go through all the education and everything else. What would you do?
Gosh, because I also follow, I would say two things. Either a competitive eater. I like Joey Chestnut and all the competitive eaters. That's probably the deprived bodybuilder part of me speaking. But but also I do follow competitive chess. Like there's some similarities to the bodybuilding industry. It's a real niche sport, but it's really interesting, and it's kind of a worldwide niche sport, and I like those niche sports. So
Very cool.
Do you work with any chess players? Because I know some enhanced prep coaches help with enhanced chess. As wild as that sounds.
Oh, really? No, I don't. I don't work with any chess players.
Okay.
It's it's
they like
interesting, though.
they like their DHTs. That's all I'll say.
You have one more, Marv?
Yeah, I got one more, and then
okay.
So last one for me. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, not fitness related, who would it be, and what would you want to ask them?
I would be interested. You said not fitness related?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're like, oh,
yeah.
Oh boy, I would be interested in. God, this is gonna sound crazy because he was kind of crazy, but Howard Hughes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I can
that
see
would be good. Yeah.
He was, he went crazy towards the end of his life, but he was such an outside the box thinker.
Yes.
And he pioneered movies and flights, and it's like such random different arenas. I don't know. I feel like he would have a lot of ideas and especially given that there was no social media and the news outlets, he probably had some ideas that never even made it to public.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last one. And I know we touched on this earlier, but I was at the boat show here in West Palm Beach this last weekend. My dad came into town and went with my wife and everything else. I saw an Aston Martin Valhalla. Don't know if you've seen it. I know, right? And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? Anyway, it made me think. This was pretty sexy. What would your dream car or truck be if money wasn't an issue?
Oh, God.
Maybe it would be a Ford Focus. I don't know. Maybe it would.
This makes me sound so boring. I wouldn't even have a dream car or whatever. I literally walk into the dealership and I'm like, just give me something that drives and is good value for the money.
You're very practical. You're very practical.
I am. I am boring beyond boring when it comes to that stuff.
Practical. We'll go with practical.
Well, I will go with practical. I know. Even when I was getting ready to buy my Elantra, my ex-wife was like, she goes, I am really curious what car you're going to end up with. I'm like, me too.
I don't even know. Yeah. All right. Yeah. On that note, I think I'll be taking us out.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get to getting the Skip, Dr. Marv, and Cliff splitting. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. If you didn't like the show, pretend you did. Like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell anyway. It should sound a little something like this. Hope it works. That worked. Use the TrueNutrition.com link to save 10% on not just Team Skip protein, but every supplement they sell. Where can people follow you on social media, Cliff, or reach out to you with any questions they might have?
Mostly Instagram at CW Team Wilson, and on my website at teamwilsonbb.com.
All right. You can reach out to Dr. Marv at theeducatedmeathead.com, and you can reach out to me at teamskip.com for some merch, if you want it. Enjoyed this episode? Be sure to click on this link. There'll be a floating link right there, Cliff, in the final show for another episode of Between Two Dumbbells.